I just built this AI system that builds an AI knowledge agent on autopilot. Because if you're not aware, these AI helper agents, which are basically ChatGPT models trained on a company's business-specific data, are fetching upwards of $1,000 per month, with mid-market chatbots falling into the $800 to $1,200 per month price range. And you can actually automate the creation of these using AI and no code. And this is the only video where not only will we build an AI knowledge agent end-to-end in our no-code tool, we'll also go through how to find the ideal client for this service right now, and how to easily find contacts, as well as a pre-made script to contact them with. And you only need to set this up once, and you can literally just type in the name of the business you're building this for, run this workflow in the background for a few seconds, and you will get your AI knowledge agent that you can hand deliver to your client in less than 5 minutes. And what's great is, since the tool we're using is no code, anyone can do it, even if you are not technical or you're a complete beginner. You just need to know how to type on your keyboard and click on your mouse, and you'll be all set. And learning about AI RAG agents is also a good use of your time, because if you just look at Google Trends, you can see the demand for this is unprecedented. So invest the next few minutes learning about this skill, because it may just be life-changing knowledge that you can learn in just a few minutes. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Jay, and it is my one mission to make AI easy to learn for anyone who wants to, especially if you want to earn from this unique point in history. And in fact, to make this as easy as possible, what I've done is collate all of the resources and prompts and tools that you need for this lesson in this page in our community, with a specific call out for these blueprint files at the bottom, which if you just download and import to the tool that we'll be using, and it will create that workflow for you without having to lift a finger. And if in case you're not yet part of the community, check that out just in the link in the video description. We have tons of other lessons here around artificial intelligence and automation. And if you unpack each one, you can see you have all the resources and prompts and blueprints you need to get started. We also have a growing community of AI professionals with more than 1,000 now. And you can see here there's a lot of knowledge sharing as well. So if you're looking for a network of people interested in this space, then this community might just be for you. Because inside, you'll be able to find ready-to-load automation blueprints, you'll get access to these step-by-step tutorials, and of course, a community of AI professionals to help you in your learning journey. So check that out if it's for you, just in the link below. All right, let's dip into this. So the framework of what we'll set up is basically illustrated here, and it's composed of 3 parts. We first need to figure out who to offer this service to, then move towards building the agent itself, and then lastly cover how to sell it. And we'll cover each of these sections in turn. And before we actually build the agent itself, it's quite important to understand who we should offer this to and what's the pain point really that we're solving. And really the good news is this kind of solution can be quite useful for any company with a lot of business-specific info. Because if you think about it, how companies or communities or any group really get their information now, especially if they have a lot of business-specific information, is they probably ask around their group and wait for answers. Or if there's documentation, then they search through those documentation themselves. But with AI, you can have an agent that is always on, available 24/7, and is trained on company information. So it's really a no-brainer of how beneficial this is for companies or groups or communities. But obviously that is still quite broad. So to narrow that down further, what we basically need is a category of customers who, number 1, need it, and number 2, whom we can easily create a prototype for. And for this tutorial, what we'll be focusing on are YouTube educators, because for these people, they usually have a community to manage either through platforms like School or Circle. And importantly as well, is they already have a wealth of content to train an agent on, which are their YouTube videos. And for most of these educators, a common pain point is really the fact that them or their team usually spends a lot of time helping members with questions, which is important, especially if you're trying to run an educational community. But obviously, setting up a team just for troubleshooting and being able to offer 24/7 support is quite difficult and costly to do without AI. And if you just look at some of the examples you can find on YouTube, there's actually quite a lot of them that cut across several industries. So there's educational content on communities around crocheting, around barbering. There's one on video editing, on how to grow on YouTube. So Communities and educators like this are really growing in prominence in recent months. And if we take just one example here, you can see that this channel about video editing has a lot of videos. There's a lot of information for new members of this channel to work through. And if we go to his community, he already has 380 members here and a wealth of content that for sure requires a level of management in order to support them with questions. And this one is another example with 21,000 members. So you can just see how beneficial it would be for this community. And this one's another example from Circle, which if you scroll down, you can see there's a lot of courses here that would be just great for community members if they have an AI agent to talk to understand which specific lesson they need to go to in order to learn something very specific. And if you stick to the end of the video, I'll show you a very simple way to find YouTube educators like these. But for the sake of this tutorial, what I'll be using as an example is Video Copilot, who was one of my favorite channels when I first learned about video editing. And there, that is basically setting the stage for understanding who this service is really meant for. And now we can go towards building this automation that in the AI space, a lot of people are calling a RAG AI agent. So it's probably worth just stepping back a few seconds just to understand what RAG even means. And it's quite simple really, because what RAG stands for is just simply Retrieval Augmented Generation. And even though that sounds too technical, that actually simply explains what this technology does specifically, because if an AI agent is built via RAG, what that essentially means is that that AI tool can retrieve information from a certain knowledge base. It will then augment it instead of just copy pasting the information from the database. And finally, it will generate an output for the user. So that's all there really is to it. And people just abbreviated it to RAG for short. So now for us to start building it, there's basically two workflows that we'll be setting up. One is to build the database that our agent will be referencing. And the second one will be to build the agent itself. And the tool that we will be using is called n8n, which if you go to the community or in the link in the video description, there's a URL there which you can click. And that will just take you to n8n, the no-code tool we'll be using, where you can get a free trial. And if in case you haven't heard of n8n before, it's basically an automation tool similar to Zapier or make.com. But you can see it shot up in popularity quite recently if you just type it on Google Trends. And that is simply because of how easy it is to use, coupled with how flexible it is to be used for AI agent workflows like the one we'll be setting up. So once you've logged into n8n, you can just go ahead and click Create Workflow here at the top right, and just go ahead and rename this with whatever you want. And the first thing we'll set up is a workflow to build our database. So if you look at our final workflow here, what this basically does is if I give it any YouTube channel, it will get the transcript of all of the videos in that certain YouTube channel and then store it in our database here, which our AI agent will be referencing later on. And we'll go through each of these nodes in turn to make it as simple as possible. And the very first step is to select a trigger. Now for this workflow, since we won't be scheduling it every day, I'll just set this to be triggered manually. So it will run whenever I click on Task Workflow here at the bottom. And the next node that you want to set up is basically a set of nodes to get the videos from a YouTube channel, as well as a transcript of those videos. So to do that, just find this HTTP request node and name that appropriately so that you know what it does. And before we go ahead and set up this node, if you're new to n8n, it might be worth stepping back just to understand how the n8n node configuration works, because each node actually has the same design of working. You basically have this window at the left, which is showing what the inputs look like coming from a previous node. This center portion is always a configuration of that specific node, and each node varies here in this section. And finally, you'll have the output, which shows what the node will pass on to succeeding nodes using its inputs and the configurations that you have set it as. So very simple. And if you look at the node we're trying to set up, it also follows the same design of working. All right. Now to get those videos from your channel, what we'll be doing is do a post request. So you can just change this method to post, and we'll be requesting from a third-party service. And what we'll put under URL is the third-party service that we'll use to get the videos from YouTube. And that service is called apify.com. So there's a link in the community, which you can just click. And basically, Apify is like a marketplace of tools, which you can see here. They are mostly around extracting data from common platforms. So if you just click on Get Started, you'll be able to sign up. And once you're in your dashboard, you can just head to the Apify store and search for the YouTube scraper. Now there's a lot of results here, but the one that we need is this one in particular from API Dojo. And to make it easy, I've just put the link of that one here in our community, which if you click will take you to this page. And what's good about Apify is that a lot of their tools are actually really cheap. So for example, this one is only 50 cents for 1,000 videos. And with the free trial, that's more than enough for testing. So what you want to just get here is under API here in the top right, click on API endpoints, and then scroll to find this line item saying run actor and get dataset items. And just click on copy to clipboard here, because this URL is what you want to put in this section in n8n. And if I just expand that here, you can basically see that it points to the URL of Apify, specifically that tool that we are using. And it even has your API key in here already plugged in for you. And this API key is a password, so don't share it around. And for example, for me, I'll be disabling that after this tutorial. And then all you need to do here is to toggle this send body as on, and then leave the body content type as JSON. And then this specify body, you can just use JSON. And you can see it's waiting for input here. And what you can do is if you head back to our community, you can just copy this whole thing and paste it there. And if you just quickly inspect that, this is basically the format that the Apify tool is accepting. And we're basically just getting all of the videos here, excluding the shorts. And for this one, we'll be getting 10 as an example. But if you need to extract the whole channel, then set this as something like 1,000 or maybe 2,000 even. And then what's important is the start URL should contain the channel that you are getting the videos from. So in our example, we'll be using the Video Copilot channel. And so now if I click on test step, you can see that in the output window, it now returned 10 videos here. And if you just check on schema, it has all the information. And most importantly, this YouTube title and the video URL. So now we have what we need from that node. And so the next one that we'll set up is another HTTP request. And this time, if you just rename this, this is now to get the transcript of those videos. And by the way, it's important to rename these nodes because not only do they make it clearer for you to understand what they do, but n8n actually uses these names as well for referencing previous inputs. So it's just good to get into that habit. And for this one, what's great is we can also use Apify for this one. So just change the method to post. And for the URL, if we go back to Apify and just type in YouTube transcript in the Apify store, again, you'll see a lot of options here. But the one I found to be the best would be this one, which if you go back to our community, there's an easy link there which you can just click to get to that page. And similar to earlier, what you just want to do is click on API on the top right, click API endpoints, find the one where it says get dataset items and copy that in. And then if you go back to n8n, just paste that into this URL section. If you do an inspect, it basically points again to Apify using that tool in particular and providing your API key as well. So now you just click on send body and same thing for the body content type, use JSON and specify body will be using JSON. And if you head back to the community under YouTube transcript JSON, there is that piece of text which you can just copy. You can just paste that into this field under JSON and make sure to change that to expression. And if you just inspect that by clicking on this to maximize it, you can see that basically this is just the format that that Apify tool is accepting. So you can look at the documentation to change these if you want. But what's important is this URL that we are passing on, and it is green because it is dynamic and is coming from the inputs from the previous node. And if you look at the result here on the right, it's basically showing that YouTube URL, which is exactly coming from the previous node that we got. So now if I click on test step, and once it's completed, you can see here in the output that it again returned 10 items for each of those videos. And importantly, it now outputted the captions, which is in a text format called XML. And if I click on this table section here, you can pretty much see that the captions were captured correctly. So there's pieces of text here which you can recognize if you just watch the video, but obviously it's not exactly human readable. So what we want to do as a next node is to actually clean that up. So if you just find a node called code, what this node will now do is take those captions and make them a bit more human readable. So we can just rename this into clean text. And within this code area, to make it easy, if you head back to the community under this code cleaner, you can just copy that whole thing and paste it here. Now, I didn't write this code. I just had help from ChatGPT to write this code with me. So you can also do that if you wish. Now, before you hit test step, you just need to make sure that the mode would be set to run once for each item, because you want this code to be run for each of these 10 videos. And now if you click on test step, you can see that it returned 10 items, and now the text is much more readable, where it shows the YouTube title and the YouTube URL, and then it starts with the transcript itself along with the timestamps. Now, if in case this code isn't working for you, a common issue is if you scroll up to the top where it's defining the YouTube titles and YouTube URLs, you can see that this piece of text right here, denoted by the prefix with a $sign, is actually getting the get vids node, which is this one which I renamed just before. So if you didn't rename this properly, then it's possible that that won't be able to reference that node. So either change this name to yours or just go back and rename this node. So it's the same thing with a YouTube URL. So just check that if in case you are not getting the titles and URLs properly. Now, the next thing we want to do is with this piece of text that is now cleaner, we actually want to create text files from this, and you can use any service to store them. But the one I like to use is Google Drive because it's much simpler. So just click on that. And then for the action, click on create file from text. Now, if you haven't set up Google Drive in n8n before, what you can simply do is to, under this credential to connect with, click on create new credential, and you can see that it is asking for a client ID and client secret here. And for you to get that, you can actually just watch this previous video I made, which if you go back to our community, you can click just this link, which if you click that, it will take you to the part of the video where I talk about how to get that client ID and client secret from Google Cloud. So once you have those, just paste them here. And then the last thing to make sure is to enable the Google Drive API in the Google Cloud console. And the way you do that is if you head back to Google Cloud, just again click on APIs and services, and under library, you can search for Drive. And if you click on this Google Drive API, you can just click enable for it to work. So now once you have that, you will now have this credential that you'll be able to connect with. And to finish setting up this node, you just want to have under file content, drag this clean text attribute into that box. And under file name, you can just scroll down and find the title of the video and put it there. And you can see it's providing a preview here. And this section is just directing Google Drive to which folder you want to put it in. And you can choose from a list, but what I like to do is to just select by ID. And if you navigate to the folder that you want to store it in, for me, it would be this. I would just grab this ID at the top, which is right beside the folder's word, and put it there. So now if I click on test step, you can see that it's successful, returning 10 items. And if I go back to my Google Drive folder, there are now 10 text files there, which if I open one of them, you can see it in a much more human-readable format where you have the YouTube title, you have the YouTube URL, as well as the timestamps and the actual transcript here. You may also notice that after 15 lines or so, we repeat the title and the URL, and we'll go through in a minute why that's important. Another piece to take note of is if in case you see that there's no transcript in this text, it doesn't automatically mean that the workflow is incorrect. Because this video in particular, if I just watch it, you can see that it's actually just a teaser for one of their products. And so there's actually no spoken words here. So there's no transcript to get. So just FYI, if you're testing with a YouTube channel that may have videos without any spoken words. So now that G Drive node has been completed, and let's just rename this to something like create.text to make sure that we know what it does. Now, if we go back to our end-in-mind workflow here, basically the remaining step is for us to transfer those text files into a vector data store or database. And this is actually not as complex as it looks, because if we just quickly step back and understand what a vector database is, the technical definition of it, you can probably look up in ChatGPT. But simply explained, a non-vector database, for example, your Google Drive, how it works is if you type in, let's say, the keyword fruit, there actually won't be any results there if the word fruit isn't stored exactly. But in a vector database, for example, Pinecone, which is the service that we'll be using in a minute, if you search for something like fruit, it can actually find you related items like apple, mangoes, bananas, because the database inherently understands that those two words are related and they have similar meanings, and so the user may be interested in these. And so you can see there why that's important as context for an AI agent to use. So now if we just continue the workflow that we're building, just add in another Google Drive node. And this time what we'll be doing is to just download those text files, which we have now created. And so you can just rename this to something like download text. And for the credential, that should be pre-filled up for you. And under file, just change that to ID and drag this ID attribute into this. And now if I click on test step, you can see that it returned 10 items under the binary tab here. And if we just open one of them by clicking on view, it will provide for you the contents of that text file. So now if we click away and just organize this a bit so that they don't take up too much space, what we can now do as a next step is extend this and look for that pinecone vector store that we just discussed and find the action add documents to vector store. And for you to set this up, you will need a pinecone account. So to set that up, just click on create new credential, and you can see it is going to ask for an API key here. So to get that, you can just head to Pinecone through this link that we have in the community. And once you're there, you can just go ahead and sign up. And in here, you can just click on AI agents. And once you finish signing up, you can actually just directly copy the API key that they will give for you. Or if you miss that, you can just head to API keys and click on create API key. And go ahead and paste it here and click on save. And you can see the connection tested successfully. So now you can use that account in your credentials. So now to finish setting this up, you would need what's called a pinecone index, which is basically like a folder where you would store all of your text files. So to do that, you just want to head to database here on the left, and under indexes, you can just click on create index and then name it with whatever you want. And for the configuration, this one's important. You can choose this OpenAI text embedding small for our use case. That's more than enough. And if you scroll down, everything here should be fine, and just click on create index. So once that's initialized, you now have an index, which is basically going to function as a folder for our text files, which we will be adding in a bit. So now, if you click away and just open that again, just to refresh this list, you should now see your pinecone index in there, and just select that. And that is now done for that window. Now you can see there's just two more things to set up here, one of which is this piece called an embedding. And if you click that, there are several options here. And basically what they all do is these would be the models that would embed the meaning in the text that you will feed this vector store, which is why these are all language models that you may be familiar with. For this example, it's important to use the one from OpenAI because that's the one we selected earlier. And if it's your first time connecting with OpenAI, you can just set up your credential same as the others, create new credential. And the only thing you need is this API key, which if you go back to our community, there's an easy URL there, which you can just click and head to so that you can sign up in OpenAI's platform. And here you can create a new secret key, give it any name, and then just go ahead and copy this in and paste that there. And when you click save, that will say the credential tested successfully and now you're connected. And under model, it's important to just choose the same one that you chose earlier. For our case, it is this embedding tree small. So click away and that's now set up. And under document, this is basically going to define how we'll load the data. So we'll just choose this default data loader. And then as to the type of data, let's just choose binary because that's how the text files will be read. And then just click away. And then you can see that it's also asking for a text splitter here. So you just click that, click on recursive character text splitter. What this will now show is it will ask you for the chunk size and chunk overlap. So what are those? And again, if we just step back, because this may affect the performance of your AI agent later on. Basically, chunking is cutting a piece of big text into smaller pieces. So let's say if you have a transcript that is 3,000 characters in length, if your chunk size is 1,000 characters, that means you will get 3 chunks. And it will just divide your transcript into 3 parts. So very simple. And then if we talk about the chunk overlap, what that basically does is overlap some of the chunks so that it retains some of the context from the previous chunks. So for example, if you have something like 250 characters, then it may look something like this. And the reason why that's just important is because you can't decide the chunk size on your own. And it's just important to understand how that affects the performance of your model. And this is obviously very simplified. As a general rule of thumb, if the chunk size is big, then the AI cost to run is also big, which is not good. But the AI context is also big, which is generally good. And what we mean by context is because what your AI agent will actually do is it will read by the chunks and provide information to the user based on those chunks. So if you just provide it a huge chunk, then it will take a lot of time to read it. That's why the cost is much sizable, but it will also have a larger context. And then if the chunk is small, then the reverse is true, where the cost you can keep as small, but the context is also small. So to decide the chunk size really is just a matter of testing. Usually somewhere in the middle, it's what's best. So if we go back to our workflow, I usually just set this for 2,500 characters because if you think about YouTube videos, That's roughly going to be 3 minutes of words on average. And then for the chunk overlap, usually something like 10 to 15% of the chunk size is best. So you can just keep that as 350. And there you go. That is now fully set up. And if you just clean that up and you click on your Pinecone vector store again and click on test step, you can see that it returned you 107 items because what it just did is take those 10 text files and divide them into individual chunks. So this one, for example, you can see that the page content is a chunk of the very first transcript, and it got lines 1 to 56. And if you go back to Pinecone and just refresh that, you will now have a lot of records here which correspond to the chunks that you just loaded. And if you just inspect any one of these, you can see why it's important to retain the YouTube title and YouTube URL and scatter them into each of the transcript, so that if, for example, your AI agent looks at chunk number 4, not only is it able to capture the transcript or what is said in that portion, but it will also have context always of the YouTube URL and the title of the video that it's from. Which is why if you go back to our text files, it's important to have these titles and videos intermittently put into the text files. But there, you just set up your very first Pinecone vector store, which is important because that is the database that our AI agent will be retrieving information from. So just click on save for that one. So now the last piece to build is the agent itself, which is a much simpler build. So now if you just go back to the n8n homepage, click on create workflow again, name this with whatever you want at the top left. And then for the first step, the trigger you want is this one called chat trigger. And we'll be setting that up later. But for now, just click away. And for the next node, just search for the AI agent. So click on that and then click away. Because now to set this up, there are just a few branches here that we would need. The very first one is the chat model that will power this agent. And there's a lot of options here, but since we've already set up OpenAI, let's use that. And for our use case, 4o mini would be applicable for us. So we can just use that one and click away. And then under memory, click on window buffer memory. Because what this will basically do is have your AI agent retain the memory of previous conversations with the user. And for the window length, just set this as 10 for 10 messages in the past and click away. And finally, under tool, you want it to be able to answer questions with a vector store. So just look for this node and click on that. Under data name, you can just name it with something like transcripts and describe it with transcripts from YouTube videos. And this one has sub-branches of its own. So we just click on model first. Again, we can just use the OpenAI chat model to make it easier. Let's retain GPT-4o mini for our case and click away. And for the vector store, this is now where you will look for the Pinecone vector store. And for the index, find the one that you were working with just now. For me, it would be this case. And then just click away. And if you just drag that here, the final thing to set up is the embedding, which again would be OpenAI because that's what we used, and keep it as text embedding tree small. And there you go. That's basically all the setup that you need. So if you just clean this up a bit, and you can also add a background to it by adding a sticky note, renaming that to something like agent build, and then changing the color to gray. Then you can just clarify that this whole part is just the building blocks of our AI agent. So now our setup is almost complete, but the last thing you need is to make sure this AI agent understands its role. So if you just double click on that, what you can do is add an option here called a system message. And what this basically does is instruct this agent of its role in life. So right now it just says you are a helpful assistant. But if you just go back to our community, we have a system prompt there, which you can just copy and paste back here. So now if we change that to expression and expand that, you can see that it is basically system instructions specific to what we are setting up, which is much better versus having a generic one. So the only thing to change here is to make sure that you provide the name of the channel or the community that you are building this for. And now that is fully set up. So now if we click on chat, that should now open a window for you to chat with your agent. And if you just talk to it here, you can now see that it replies back. And obviously what's important is this is different from ChatGPT because it has access to specifically trained data that you just provided to it through this Pinecone vector store. So if you ask something specific like, which of Video Copilot's videos will teach me about glitch effects, you can see that it is grabbing information from the Pinecone vector store it pointed me to the specific video where I can learn from, and even the link to that tutorial, which if I click, would take me straight to the video, which is important because if you have dozens of videos, it can get confusing for your community or your viewers on which video to watch. And to take it further, I can actually talk to this assistant around that specific video. So if I ask it something like, what part of that video talks about fractal noise? Because it has access to the timestamps, it actually can suggest to me parts of the video where I can learn more about that topic. So now for you to demo this to your client, what you basically just need to do is click on the trigger and then make this chat publicly available. And now you can see that there is this URL, which you can just copy and paste into a browser, and you'll be able to talk to it. But before you do that, make sure that you change this workflow to become active so that that link can work. If we grab that and paste it in any window, you can see that there is now this chat window that is easy to demo to your client. So to customize this a bit, you can just change the initial message here into something like this. And under options, the key ones to add is this subtitle and this title, which if you go back to that link, this is basically the title and this would be the subtitle. So now with that changed, so now if I click away and click on save, if I copy that URL again, it should now update those values depending on what you set here. And you can talk to it similar to what you were just doing earlier. So you can see here, if I ask it the same question, it was able to provide me a helpful answer. And there you go, congratulations, you just built your RAG AI agent. And so now that we know how to build it, the only remaining part is to learn how to sell it. And the first thing you need in that process is to first look for prospects that you can offer this to. A simple method that you can use is to just copy this snippet in our community. And if you go to Google, you can just paste that in and replace this keyword with whatever you want. So for example, if I'm looking for communities about video editing, and if I just search that, what it is now providing me is several YouTube channels who also have either a school community or a circle community being advertised in their descriptions. So now this is your sweet spot of YouTube creators who are educating their audience and is also actually managing a community. So from here, you can actually click each of these in order to just contact them. But to make it easier, what you can also do is to just go to ChatGPT. And if you head to our community, there is a prompt sample there which you can use and copy. And if you just paste that and send it, you can see that basically what this will ask ChatGPT to do is to summarize our Google search results into a clean table format while also creating an initial email for them for your first contact. And of course, you can customize it however you wish, but you can see now that I've pasted that to ChatGPT, it is now waiting for me to paste the Google search results. So if I just go back to Google, hit on Control A, and then copy everything there, or hit Control C, then I can paste all of that information here and just let ChatGPT summarize and clean that up for me. So now you can see all of these channels being summarized along with the URL to their community, as well as a personalized outreach script, which you can use to contact them. So now if I copy this whole thing, I can now just go to Google Sheets and just paste that in. And now we'll just have a tracker for you to be able to reach out to these community owners. And to get their contact, basically what you can do under each YouTube channel, you can view their email address here by clicking on that and just submitting that CAPTCHA. So this part is quite difficult to automate because of that CAPTCHA. But what's great is most YouTubers do have this email right there on their channel. And if they have Instagram, then that's a good way to contact them as well. And when they're interested, what you can just do is to run this automation once, change their channel here in this initial node when you load their transcripts, and then get this chat URL to provide them as your demo and also the final product, as it is a good MVP. So the one already provided by n8n is actually already a good MVP or minimum viable product. But in a future video, I can make a tutorial of how to customize the look of that further so that you can brand it to the specific company you're working on this for, especially for big clients. So tune in for that and subscribe to the community if you want to get updated when that is available. And also just remember that this is sort of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this service, because this type of AI agent can really be useful to any company or any business with a lot of company-specific information. And there you go. You have just built your first RAG AI agent and learned the fundamentals of who to offer it, how to build it, and how to sell it. So if you like this content, please like and subscribe. It does help us a lot. And if you're interested to learn more about AI, then check out the RoboNuggets community just in the link in the video description. Here we have dozens of lessons all around the mission of making AI easy to learn and earn from. And if you open up each, there are all the resources that you would need in order to make this as easy as possible. And we also have more than 1,000 members now. So if you want a network of AI professionals who are doing really cool things with all the latest tech in AI, then check it out. Maybe this community is for you. Because here you'll get access to step-by-step tutorials, AI and automation blueprints, which are ready to import and load, and a community that is growing. So have a look at that just in the link in the video description. That's it for this one. See you guys next time. Thank you.